Welcome to episode 14 of the Beyond the Guitar podcast, where we help you play the music you love and we talk all things guitar and beyond. I'm Nathan Mills, joined by my co-host Jeremiah Diaz, and a week or so ago, I put up a video on my instructional channel on YouTube that I called the Free Solo Mindset. And this is something that I've been thinking about for a couple of years and something that I've kind of adopted in my own guitar practice. And it's named after and inspired by the documentary Free Solo, which follows Alex Honnold, who's a rock climber who specializes in free soloing, which is essentially just rock climbing without a rope or any type of safety harnesses or anything. It's absolutely insane. But that's what makes the documentary so fascinating. And so the concept of the documentary was that he was going to be the first to free solo El Capitan, which is a 3,000-foot sheer rock face in Yosemite National Park here in the U.S. And so it follows his preparation and his climb of this. So today we wanted to kind of unpack this mindset a little bit further and just talk about kind of how this documentary inspired us and how I was thinking about how things within this documentary and Alex Honnold's process as a rock climber can translate to our process as guitarists and musicians. And I don't know, just with YouTube, I feel like I'm kind of always up against the clock. I've got to make my points quick before people get distracted and move on. So I feel like there's so much good stuff to talk about with this that I wanted to unpack it further with Jeremiah in the podcast. So Jeremiah, you did your homework and you watched the documentary for the first time actually yesterday, right?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah,
it was pretty nice. I mean, I'd heard a lot about it, and I knew that that he does it,
right?
So it wasn't like it was still. I don't know. It's hard to describe. It's still like a really, really anxiety inducing.
Yeah,
like the whole time. Because he keeps reading about his buddies that are dying rock climbing and he's kind of he's an interesting guy. I think he has some sort of emotional I don't know what you would call him, but I mean they even do like a brain scan and like they show that he doesn't respond to scary, quote unquote scary things like his fear. The fear portion of his brain doesn't really activate very easily.
Yeah, it takes much higher like stimulus to it. What is the amygdala or something like that? Takes a lot more stimulus to actually activate. Which it's fascinating to know like whether it's kind of inconclusive as far as whether that's a nature versus nurture thing. Is that like something he was born with, or is it just a matter of like doing this insane climbing without any rope has just changed how his brain functions?
Yeah, and like his mom talks about how his dad wasn't diagnosed, but like today she says would be diagnosed with Asperger's, which I don't remember if now that they just say like high functioning autistic and they don't use Asperger's anymore.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know if that's hereditary, but he definitely if he doesn't have some form of autism, I think he probably got some of that from his dad or something. I mean, they mentioned that he didn't learn how to hug people properly until like he was like in college or something.
Right.
Like, he didn't hug. Like he had very little emotional connection to people in that way.
Yeah, it was like a combination. Again, it was one of those things where you don't know how much of it is something he was something genetic or the upbringing, because they did mention too like growing up like they weren't affectionate in any way. But yeah, he's just such a fascinating guy. I mean, he's an incredible guy. I mean, what he accomplished is nuts. Yeah. And this is going to be,
I mean, yeah, the athletic ability that he has, it's insane.
Yeah.
Well, and the reason why I went on a tangent, but I was going to say that like he was reading an article about how one of his climbing buddies like dies like as they're filming. I don't remember his name, but one of his buddies died while filming, And he's just reading it, and he's like, yeah, I mean, yeah, it can happen. Yeah.
Right.
It's just like not even, he's like, whatever.
Yeah, he's really kind of callous about it. And like, it's really interesting for sure. And so needless to say, there's already have been some spoilers for the documentary, but I feel like, first of all, it's been out for a while. Second of all, it's a documentary, so I feel like the rules for spoiling work differently. But that being said, if you really don't want any spoilers for Free Solo, go watch it real quick and come back. But yeah, oh my gosh, it's just so, it's just to try to put yourself in his shoes as he's climbing. And like you said, like, I watched this because I watched a bunch of interviews. Like, this won an Oscar, so like I saw these Oscar interviews with Alex Honnold, and so obviously I knew that he made it as well before even watching the documentary. But just watching him climb this 3,000-foot cliff, where literally, like, sometimes the grip like that he can get is literally just like 3 fingers is the only thing that's keeping him from falling, or like he's shimmying up this crack up
and it's 3 fingers on like
a nub,
on like a millimeter of like, rock that's it's crazy.
Which also, if you see his hands, like I feel like you don't see it very clearly in the documentary. It really stands out if you watch interviews. He's got the craziest looking hands. Yeah. These meaty, because he's really fit, but he's kind of a small guy, which works well, I'm sure, for climbing. Like, you don't want to be a big guy. Yeah. But his hands are just so massively beefy. They're like these big claws. It's crazy looking.
All of his buddies in the documentary, even like the camera crew, because they're all climbers. Yeah. And you look at their hands and they're all like just warped and like big and weird areas. Right. It was funny too because he even talks about like his girlfriend in the documentary, and he referenced like initially when he's like, kind of like talking about her, he's like, yeah, she's not really a climber. Like, I wouldn't say she's a climber. But then they cut to her like climbing up these crazy rock faces, and it's like, oh, she's not really a climber, but by his standards, I guess. Although she kind of almost gets him killed. They talk about that. But maybe that's more what he was referring to, that she doesn't have like a lot of experience or something. But anyway. Yeah.
So obviously we haven't really, like, we're going to kind of geek out about it a little bit throughout the conversation because, I told Jeremiah he should definitely watch it before we talk about this. And so we haven't had a chance to really like talk about it together. We figured we'd save it for the conversation, but there's so much cool stuff that happens there. And one cool thing that I didn't really actually think about until driving over here to the studio, cause this all happens in Yosemite, and Jeremiah and I actually went to Yosemite together back in college. We did a big hiking trip.
Yeah, I was thinking about that the whole time we were watching the documentary.
Yeah, and so
how unprepared we were for Yosemite.
Well, so we didn't, and we weren't even rock climbing. We were literally just hiking and still didn't know what we were getting into. And we hiked up Half Dome, which is one of the major like sites in Yosemite. It's this crazy looking, literally, it's a half dome of like granite, just big rock, and then it just drops like the half. The half dome part is a slope up, and then it's just a sheer rock face down into the valley, and you can hike up the side of it. And in the documentary, it talks about how before all this, he had already free soloed Half Dome. Right. Which that was one thing too, when Jeremiah and I got to the top of Half Dome, we, with our buddy Leighton, kind of hung over the edge. And I'm like petrified of heights as it is. Like, I really, I can't handle heights. And so it was all I could do to just barely shimmy my body enough to barely peek over the edge, because it's literally a sharp drop.
And what the surface we were laying on, like it did kind of have a slant, like a downward slant a little bit. Yeah, so it really did feel like he could slide off if you weren't careful.
It gives me the heebie-jeebies just thinking about it. And so to imagine, like, looking down there and then imagining somebody just climbing up that. And I think that's 2,000 feet.
It's
so imagining somebody climbing that with no ropes and anything. And so he already did that. And this whole documentary is him doing one that's even crazier than that. Another whole, it's 3,000 total feet, I think. So, so that just gave a whole new perspective. Like I was freaking out just climb, because to hike up, you basically pull yourself up these like cables. It really is kind of sketchy, I gotta say. Like you basically, they have boards that are bolted into the side of the slope, which is pretty steep, and you basically just hoist yourself up these cables, but it's kind of a sheer drop right to left.
Well, and we went before, so they implemented a lottery system because Yosemite has been so impacted by tourists lately. You can't go to the top anymore.
Oh wow!
You have to like I haven't looked into it because I haven't been back, but you have to like either pay to get into a lottery or something like that, and they only hand out a certain amount of passes to the top of Half Dome every year. So if we were to go today, it would be really hard to actually go up to the top. So
interesting.
We got lucky.
I thought you were gonna say because like X amount of people like died because it was like.
Well, I think they banned rock climbing on Half Dome as well because people were dying. But
well, rock climbing, that's nuts. But
know that for sure.
Even the hiking, because it was like two ways. Like people were coming down.
It was like a total 12. What was it, like 12-hour round trip or 12 hours to? I remember we left at like 5 a.m. or something. Started hiking at 5 a.m.
Wow, that's impressive. I'm surprised that we managed to do that.
Dude, we were crazy. We were also in better shape, but
yeah, that's true.
But so I was thinking about, the whole talk is about like preparation and like executing perfectly and all this stuff. And I was just thinking about, we went to Yosemite we didn't have a tent. We didn't have anything like that. We slept in a car. We didn't have any food, no water. We were just, you and Leighton, well, Leighton was living here at the time, but you were visiting us. And we were like, hey, let's go to Yosemite. It'd be awesome. So we went and didn't prepare like at all. And we got there and we saw this trail that was like 3 miles up this like basically mountainside. I mean, it wasn't a climb. It wasn't like, rock climbing or anything like that. But it's like basically stairs, all like the natural, rocks and stuff that you could climb all the way up. And I think it was like 3 miles. And we're like, 3 miles, that's cool. We'll do that. So we got there, we didn't have any water or anything. We started climbing, and I think we got like halfway, and we were exhausted, like hungry, thirsty. We were like, well, man, like what did we get ourselves into? And we're like, so if Half Dome if we're trying to do Half Dome tomorrow, and this is supposed to be like 12-hour hike, we got to prepare. So I remember we just turned around and went back down like a mile and a half down this side of the mountain, and there's like a store, like a little, grocery store or whatever for tourists. And we got like all kinds of like water and snacks.
Right.
And then we did Half Dome the next day, and we actually made it to the top, which is crazy. But
I remember
oh my gosh.
And this is so weird and gross to think about. I remember like distinctly craving yogurt. Do you remember us talking about that? I think maybe it was just me and Leighton, because it seems like you would think that was weird. But like
I don't remember that.
When we were like hiking back down, I was like, man, I could really go for some like cold yogurt right now. It's like any dairy when you're hot and sweaty sounds like absolutely disgusting. I don't know what was going on. We're delirious.
And the other crazy thing that we did is on the way down. So going up to Half Dome, obviously most of it's uphill. So by the time you get there, you're just exhausted. So on the way back, Nathan, you probably remember this. We decided to run for this crazy portion of the trail where it's just all rock, and you kind of have to like shimmy, like not shimmy, but like. Do you remember this part where you just kind of have to like climb over these rocks? Like they're not huge, but they're just little like boulders. And we decided to run down, and we were like jumping across these rocks along the trail. And one little slip, we could have seriously sprained our ankle or broken our leg or something.
Right.
And we did it. And I was thinking about it and how we just had this like we were just like, okay, we're just gonna go. We're not gonna think about it. We're just gonna do it. And I'm not comparing us to Alex Honnold at all, but
pretty much same thing.
Yeah, exactly. But we just didn't think about it, and we just went for it. Yeah. And we didn't get hurt. We ran. I don't know how long that portion of the trail is, but we did the whole thing running down.
That's true. Yeah, I forgot about that.
Because it was downhill, and we didn't want to. We figured it'd be harder to work our way around the rocks like we did going up.
Right.
We were stupid.
Oh, to be young again. I would shatter every single bone in my body if I tried to do that right now.
I wouldn't make it to have. I mean, it'd probably take me 24 hours, with stops, camping along the way. And
oh man, I'd probably just stay home and play video games. But yeah, so speaking of
been there, done that.
Yeah. So I kind of broke this mindset down into 3 main areas, and I wanted to kind of unpack each of those together. Now, first of all, whenever I kind of explain this, because I've mentioned this in lessons with students over the last year or so, ever since I first watched Free Solo, and almost everybody, when I first bring this concept up, they laugh at me every time I first talk about this, because it does sound kind of absurd. And the gist of this free solo mindset is as I was watching Alex Honnold like prepare for this crazy, dangerous undertaking, and the level of detail and focus and sheer just preparation, because the stakes were so high, because he knew if he made one mistake that could mean, certain death. So I thought about like, what if the stakes were that high with our own pursuits in music and guitar, and like, what if it was literally a matter of life or death if we made a mistake? How differently would we practice and would we prepare? And so that's how this all like kind of this whole mindset came. I started thinking about it, but when I first bring that up to people, they kind of laugh at me, because obviously it's ridiculous, because of course the stakes are not high with music, at least for most of us, unless you get in some really weird scenario where, like, I don't know, you have to play something perfectly at gunpoint or what. Like, I mean, I don't know, but and then also after putting up the video, some people don't get it. Like I got a comment after somebody, I assume they watched the whole video. I mean, maybe they didn't, maybe they watched 5 seconds and they're like, what's the connection between rock climbing and this whole life and death scenario and guitar? I don't get it. So anyway, regardless, I figured it'd be worth unpacking more, because there are a lot of people who I really have conversations with this about, who are like, yeah, I get that. I really like that. It's a cool way of thinking of our practice. So the first element of the free solo mindset is treating mistakes with gravity, which is, it's kind of, I've said this, I've always talked about treating mistakes with gravity, but in this context, it's kind of an unfortunate pun, because of course, gravity has a much more serious sense for Alex Honnold with rock climbing. But the concept here is that in our practice, we need to treat mistakes with much more seriousness than we generally do. And I'm going to, with every facet of this mindset, if you just take each element at face value, it's kind of like, okay, well, that's obvious. Like, okay, yeah, treat mistakes like they're serious. But the thing that, if you really get this free solo mindset, it means that you understand that it's each one of these elements is taken to the extreme, because again, we're imagining this hypothetical scenario where the stakes are incredibly high and it's life or death. So if a mistake means certain death, how are we going to prepare in a way to prevent those mistakes from ever happening? And I think one quote from the documentary really kind of summed it up really well. Alex Honnold said, free solo mentality is close to warrior culture, because you give something 100% focus because your life depends on it. Yeah. And I think I think it's much more apparent when your life literally depends on it. There's this level of focus that comes into play automatically, because your whole survival sense is going to kick in. And so it's something, as musicians, where obviously the stakes aren't that high, I think it's something we have to kind of really think about and unpack. What does that mean for us to practice in a way that prevents mistakes? And this is so important because we're developing muscle memory as we practice. And if we have this casual approach to mistakes, that means we're going to be making mistakes in our practice, which means we're going to be more likely to make those mistakes again. Every time it's math. Every time you play something wrong, you're more likely to play it wrong again, right? You've got to set the balance in favor of that positive muscle memory where you've done something correctly more than you've done it incorrectly. And so, I think it's a cool exercise to think about, okay, in my practice right now, if I make a mistake, that's it. I'm falling off the cliff. And so that's going to change how fast you approach the music. Like a new section, you're going to take it very slowly. You're going to pay extreme attention to detail. Every movement is going to be planned out, and that mirrors what's happening in the documentary as well. You're not going to speed up just because you got it right once or twice, right? You're going to continue to stay slow until you've really got it under your fingers, and then you're going to start speeding up gradually. All these things that we kind of take for granted, and we get in this lazy cycle of just, you make a mistake, all right, I'll fix it. Oh, there's another mistake, okay, I'll try to fix it. Rather than that preventative practice where we try to avoid the mistake in the first place.
It makes you think of that scene in the documentary where he has that section of El Capitan that's like where he falls off when he's practicing with ropes and he sprains his ankle really bad.
Yeah,
and he doesn't really know what happened. And his like friends and stuff are like really like this isn't good, but he goes back to that spot and he figures out a different way to approach it because he, for whatever reason, the way he was doing it before just didn't work for him. And so he figures out another way to go about it. And and then you see him do it when he goes up when he does it for real, when he does it free solo. So,
right.
It's wild.
Yeah. And I never really knew, because I've rock climbed like maybe once or twice in my life. And I think I like hurt my hands or something. I was like, maybe this isn't a good hobby for me. So I never knew,
you gotta break your nails off.
Yeah, exactly. I never knew really the attention to detail for every specific move. So I really saw a parallel in the precision of how he talks through all of his specific movements that he's making. And that sounds actually very similar to my problem-solving process as I'm, maybe trying to transition between one difficult chord position to another. He talks about, okay, I've got to do, and he's got names like a thumb crimp to my, and I've got to cross my thumb over and pinch my right thumb over it and then shimmy with my left leg. And if I get this, hook right here, and it's just like, yeah, very, very detailed. And I feel that you need that same level of detail in our playing where like I'll think, okay, I can pivot from this finger. If I hold this finger down, I can sustain that melody note while swinging this other finger over here and then stacking the chord, prioritizing the bass note first because that's what we hear first. Like all this, these little details that sometimes people just get in a rut of practice where you just think, you're thinking about how much time you have to practice, and you're thinking about just, okay, I'm just going to get sheer repetitions in. If I do this enough, I'm going to get better. And then you lose what's really makes a difference in your practice, which is the paying attention to those small details and having the strategy in your movements and problem solving what's not working, what could I do differently to set myself up for this transition in the correct way. And so, yeah, it's just the level of detail that you need to really see significant progress. I mean, I've seen it time and time again where you can, if you've got the time, if you can spare hours and hours a day, you can get away with lazy practice, but for most people, that's not a luxury that they have. And so you have to be a lot more efficient. So that's where something like this comes into play. Kind of related to all this, there was another quote where the friend that I guess this kind of puts things in perspective too. I liked this quote. Alex Honnold's friend who was helping him train, he was kind of just drawing a picture of how crazy this whole free soloing thing is, he said, imagine.
Oh, yeah. And this guy's also a professional climber. I don't remember his name either, but he's not just like some Joe Schmo.
Well, he's a guy that, and Alex said he looked up to him when he was like a kid, like he was one of his heroes.
Yeah.
And this guy thinks this is nuts. But he says, imagine an Olympic gold medal event where if you don't get the gold medal, you die. Like that's how hard what Alex Honnold's doing, and that's how high the stakes are. And so it's like just this impossible scenario. And I
was looking it up on Wikipedia afterwards, and it says his climb of El Capitan is like widely considered one of the greatest athletic achievements of all time. Like just not even in rock climbing, just athletics. Period.
Yeah, I mean, I get it.
Nuts.
Yeah. And so again, I bring that up because these are just all things that like to contribute to this mindset in your practice, just kind of envisioning these insane stakes that you're up against and seeing how that would translate to how you practice a piece of music. I find really, really fascinating.
It's kind of like this, this is kind of a weird parallel, but it's kind of like in video games where you have a game where if you die, like you go back like 2 minutes prior or whatever, so it's like not a huge deal,
right?
Like to the previous save versus a game where you die and then you have to like start all over again. And so you have to be way more careful. Yeah,
it's like a I've had that happen like with games like Call of Duty and stuff like that, where it's like a fast pace, like you die and you respawn right away and you go back into it. You just get really like it doesn't really matter. So yeah, I mean that's a good parallel. It changes how you approach things, even in something as obvious where the stakes obviously are not high in video games, even less so. But it really does. It changes how you approach things, and so I don't know. Maybe a way to take this a step further would be to actually like raise the stakes and like I don't know. Every time I make a mistake in my practice, I have to like. I don't know, pay somebody's rent for a month or something.
That'd be crazy.
But
yeah, I mean, I'm not like I've mentioned this. I'm not a guitarist, but I have been focusing more on playing slower and figuring out finger transitions and stuff, and how best to, like you were saying, like what note is going to be heard first, what. How my fingers changing as far as like, is the index finger going to stay on the same string? Is it good, or is the, do I have to do some finger independence training?
That's right.
Because my, my pinky and my ring finger are switching strings or whatever. And so, I've been trying to do more of that slow, intentional practice. And it's helped a lot.
Yeah. It's one of those things, man, where like, I think that some of the people who didn't get this video when I put it out, I know the people who like when I talk about practicing slow, because I preach this so much and it's a universally accepted thing, everybody gets it, but I always know like the people that I talk to about practicing slow who kind of like roll their eyes and are like, oh yeah, that's obvious, those are the people who I know aren't doing it.
Yeah,
like the people who like say like, okay, yeah, that's obvious, like we know that this is something we're supposed to be doing, but I know for a fact that most of us don't do it, at least to the amount that we should. I don't do it as much as I should. I know that just because, we're all human and we're all impatient. And that's why a mentality like this, a mindset like this is so important to remind us like, okay, let me role play here a little bit and pretend that just get myself in this zone where if I make a mistake, boom, I'm gone. It just helps us. It's a tool that we have to help us practice in the way that we know we should practice.
Yeah, well, it kind of goes along with like, with any type of sports. Like, Nathan, we played basketball together in high school and stuff. And
yeah.
The practice
Starter,
portion,
varsity.
Yeah. Out of the immense competition in our high school in Casablanca, Morocco.
Yeah, if you touched a basketball, you were basically guaranteed a starting position.
Yeah. That being said, our coach trained us really hard as far as our endurance and all that. So, but the practicing isn't always fun, and most time it isn't fun.
Right.
Training isn't really fun. The fun part is when you get to if you're doing a performance, or I mean, sometimes that can be anxiety inducing, but when you like, let's say a sports thing, when you're out there playing a game that you've trained for and you've prepared for, the game is what's fun, right? But the training, when when we're doing 60s, as our coach called them, you had to run up and down the court 5 times in 60 seconds. Like, that was brutal.
Yeah.
And it wasn't fun, but it helps you prepare for the ultimate test. And it even in the documentary, when he finally does climb El Capitan, like, you can see it in his face, and he gets past the problem. He's like smiling. He smiles at the camera,
right?
Like multiple times, and it's insane. It's like, this guy's basically on the verge of dying, and he's like loving every second of it. So, but the preparation portion is not. He's frustrated at many times. He has downfalls, and he gets injured, and all these things happen. And he even tries to go up one time. Before he actually does it, he goes up and he's like, "Nah, I'm not feeling it today. I got to call it."
Right.
And it's like, it's crazy. But anyway, the fun part comes with the preparation that, with intentional practice and preparation.
Right. Well, continuing on, the second point that I kind of dissected from this mindset is to know your music deeply. Which also, again, just taking at face value, that's like, okay, maybe that's obvious, but we're talking about these high stakes. So dialing that up to 11, what does that really mean if you can't leave anything up to chance? And I think it was interesting because he always talked about how in more often than not, he felt safe free soloing because of all the prep that he did. He wasn't the kind of guy, or isn't the kind of guy, he says, to just like, I think the term was like, just squeak by a climb, like to just barely make it by the skin of your teeth. Like, He was only going to do it. And like Jeremiah was saying, when he didn't feel right, he backed down. Like he's only going to do it if the prep is ready, if his fitness is ready, if he knows it, frontwards and backwards. And so it's the preparation that made him feel safe doing something so crazy. And so knowing our music deeply, the inspiration that I got really from this documentary was just watching. The majority of the documentary is watching his preparation and the level of detail and just dedication that he puts into his prep. Not only just the physical side of it, but the mental side is absolutely crazy. So, I mean, you see there are segments of him laying in bed, like they're getting ready to go to bed. He's laying in bed and he's just filling out his climbing journal, which I guess every day he kind of jots down what he did, what worked, what didn't work. But he could literally walk you through and recite step by step the entire climb, with it, not being on the rock wall, not even seeing it. He can kind of visualize it in his mind, and not only just step by step, but in great detail, like saying how each grip should feel and just every aspect of the movement. And that just that just kind of blew me away.
I love the part where he's talking to, again, I wish I remembered his name, but his climbing buddy, and he's asking him like, "Hey, so you ever write about like, some cool juniper tree you saw, or like, missing your mom or missing your dog or whatever?" He's like, no, I don't. I don't.
Yeah, he's like, nah, not in the climbing journal. No.
Yeah,
it's like he's all business.
Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah, and
we were kind of talking about this before, Nathan, but to go on a tangent, but it's just like these types of personalities that you see, and especially like, well, it's in any field. I guess you could talk, like CEOs are kind of crazy too, but
yeah,
we were talking about how like you just have to have this obsession, and how in athletics there's oftentimes these people that are just obsessed with what they do, and I would say he's one of them. I recently watched the Last Dance, which is a documentary about Michael Jordan and the Bulls.
Yeah,
and yeah, Michael Jordan is just obsessed with winning and obsessed with like perfecting his craft. And he goes, when he loses a series in the playoffs, he goes back and studies, he goes back and trains harder and like pushes his teammates and like cusses his teammates out because they're not trying hard enough. So like it's just like they get obsessed with the craft. But
yeah, it's just observing people like this that are at the absolute top of their field. You have to be a little bit crazy to get there. Because I mean, I love watching these people because there's so much that you can learn, but I'm also aware that I have no interest in reaching like that, like whatever the equivalent would be in the guitar world, for example. Like, I know that what it takes to get there, I don't have that same level of obsession to the extent that it's all encompassing, meaning everything else is second fiddle. Even that's like one of the awkward things in the documentary is kind of the relationship with his girlfriend is like, she's always going to come second to his climbing is kind of what's communicated. And so for me, I love my family. I love my wife and my kids, and I have other hobbies outside of guitar. Like I love music and I love guitar, and I'm so fortunate to be able to be doing it for a living. But I know that to be the best of the best of the best, that would take everything. And I don't want to give everything to it, and so I'm very aware that these people, there's like a quote that always sticks with me. It was I don't remember who it was, but it was a world-renowned pianist who finished a concert, and somebody in the audience came up to him and said, "Oh my goodness, I would give my life to be able to play like you." And he just looked her down and he said, "I have."
Yeah.
he sacrificed everything to be able to do that. And that's kind of what this Alex Honnold guy is. He's like, everything, where he lives, what he eats, where he sleeps, everything is revolving around climbing, which is really inspiring. But I also, I like video games. Yeah.
Well, it's funny because right after he climbs El Capitan, he goes back down to his van and he starts doing pull-ups.
Yeah.
He starts training some more.
Absolutely nuts.
And the filmmaker's like, anybody else would take the afternoon off or whatever.
Go get a burger.
And he goes
or something.
He goes back to his van and starts doing pull-ups.
Right.
This is like insane.
And
not regular pull-ups, like pull-ups where you're like just
like your finger
hanging
just
on by your fingertips.
It's crazy. But so this whole idea of just knowing your music deeply, I always tell my students to memorize your music as quickly as possible. And there are some teachers who I respect who disagree with me on that for various reasons. There's kind of two camps, but my thought behind that is you need to be fully engaged in what you're doing and what your hands are doing. And when we're staring at the page, we're not really paying attention. We're not able to pay attention in the same way that we could if we're watching our fingers, to get to that level where we're, like I was talking about before, dissecting every movement and seeing how we could be a little bit more efficient with our finger placement and things like that. And so, as musicians, sometimes, especially, sometimes it's hard for us to even just memorize our music, much less know it to this level. And so I think, again, it's inspiring to just aspire to that level, to say like, look, I'm not just going to memorize this. I'm going to be able to play through this piece of music in my mind with my eyes closed without a guitar in my hand. And that's something that when it comes to performance, I actually do that. And because I'm always, the thing that makes me afraid with performances is memory slip-ups. Like, I don't really care if I flub a note or so. Like, that's not a huge deal, but I don't want to forget where I'm going. That terrifies me. And so I go that extra mile, and I can tell you that when you know your music deeply and you can visualize it like that, and, to the extent that we're talking about, like Alex Honnold here knew his route, the amount of confidence that gives you in your playing when the performance does come up is, it's worth its weight in gold. Because when it all goes back to imagining the stakes being so high. If the stakes are high, you don't want to leave anything up to chance. You don't want to rely on your fickle muscle memory, because that, goes out the window if you mess something up and lose your momentum, or if you second guess yourself. But truly knowing it on a deep intellectual level, and being very intentional about memorizing it and practicing visualizing it is super important.
Yeah, I have to do that a lot because with drumming, because I don't have a practice space, so it really sucks. So when we do practice as a band, we're usually at like someone's garage or whatever. But so what I have to do to make sure that I'm confident going into a show is like I play the music back and I visualize what I'm going to do. I listen to our songs a lot because sometimes if we haven't done a show in like 6 months or something, I'll know the song, but I won't necessarily think about what I'm supposed to be playing. So yeah, that visual. I can't even say that word. How do you say this word? Visualization. How do you visualization? Visualization. There you go. I had a massive brain. Visual.
The visualization.
I was like, what? I was like visualizing the word, and it's like, that's an S. How do I pronounce that S? Visual. Oh man. Visualization. See, this is why you need to practice slowly and intentionally.
That's right.
Man. Anyway, so yeah.
I'm just letting you figure it out.
Oh geez. But anyway, that really helps with playing drums because I have limited practice time, which really sucks. But yeah.
Yeah. One thing that related to that too, when he was going through his journal, his climbing journal, he was kind of reading an excerpt out from it. He had 2 words that he really brought attention to, and he's like, I've got these underlined. He said, trust ... autopilot. And that was referencing specifically, I think that part that you were talking about earlier, where it was one of the hardest parts of the climb, where he really had to, it was kind of like there were 2 ways he could do it. One way, it was like literally a jump, and the other one was he has to do this karate kick thing to reach out to the ledge.
Yeah.
Both were extremely dangerous. And that really stuck with me too, because that translates very well to music as well, to the extent that when you've done the work, when you've done the preparation, then you've earned the right to be able to trust yourself and to go on autopilot. And that's really the space that you want to be in. When it comes time to perform, you don't want to be thinking about all these details. That's the time for that is in the preparation. When it comes time to perform, you want to be able to just trust and go on autopilot. And I know that the times in my career where I've had the best performances are the times when I can just turn my brain off and not sabotage myself and just not think. So I actively try not to think when it comes performance time, because I know any thinking is really going to just harm me at that point. I know myself well enough, and I know that if I've done the prep, I don't need to think. And so that's important to remember. Just trust that you've done the work. If you've done the work, trust it and autopilot. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, well, and that's what's so crazy about sections of the climb that he did is they focus mainly on. I think what is it, like 5 or 6 what they call pitches or whatever, where there's specific like problems that he has to get past in the climb. Mm-hmm. But then there's like hundreds of feet where he's just cruising, like, and they don't really focus on that. But he's like, for any normal person, like this would be impossible, like climbing, just up this freaking cliff, and they don't even show it. They just have a little line go, a little visual aid, and then they go to the next like quote unquote problem. Right. But yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, that's the thing, is really like to fully grasp this, you really have to watch it, which I highly recommend. It's on Hulu. I think is where
Disney Plus.
Oh, it is Disney Plus too. Yeah. So I mean, pretty much half the planet has 1 or 2 of those. So highly recommend watching it to just really get this perspective. So the third part of this, and I feel like this is honestly the most important part, because the first 2 elements of the mindset, the treating mistakes with gravity and knowing your music deeply, to the extent that this mindset is calling for, as far as like the level of focus and dedication that you need to really execute both of these elements at a high level, you need this third element or it's just not going to work. And that's take joy in the pursuit of excellence. And this kind of ties back into what you were saying, Jeremiah, where you were talking about like the fun part really is like the end product and the, like, whether it's the game or the performance, or like when you get to reap the fruits of your labor. And I think that's very true to the extent that that's, and that comes more naturally. But what I want to encourage everybody to really think about with this is to find ways to enjoy the mundane of the preparation, because that's the majority of what we have, right? Like, we spend so much time honing our craft, and if we're only enjoying the end product, then that's, I feel like we're missing out on a lot of satisfaction, and a lot of people will probably lose motivation along the way. And I deal with this a lot with my students, where I take this very seriously as part of my job as their teacher, to try to help motivate them and encourage them and help them enjoy the process itself. And so that's something that, again, just watching the level of passion that Alex Honnold has for climbing, and every facet of his life, like we talked about, is geared toward just facilitating climbing. He really does seem like he genuinely just loves every aspect of it. And for some people that might come more naturally, but for others of us, like, we have to work at that. Like, we are more prone to just enjoying that end product. But like I said in the video, the YouTube video for this, we don't want to just take satisfaction in the end product, because that's what we're always chasing, right? We're always kind of just, and especially with music too, there's not a summit that we can reach as clearly as in rock climbing, right? There's not really as clear of an end product. Yes, there's a performance, but in music, we're always kind of refining. And so if you're only chasing that perfect end result, you're always just going to be delaying that gratification. And you don't want to just take joy in how beautiful the music sounds, because it might not always, as we know, sound that beautiful, right, in the preparation. And you don't want to just take enjoyment in maybe how the music is making you feel, because, like Jeremiah was saying, like, the practice and the preparation is messy and lots of times boring and not exciting. And so we really have to work to get in this mindset. It's a mental discipline to find ways to really take joy and satisfaction out of just the act of pursuing excellence. So you take that one measure and you're going to treat mistakes with gravity, and you're going to know your music deeply. So when you look at that one measure, find satisfaction in saying, like, if I accomplish nothing else today, I'm going to know every aspect of what my fingers have to do in this measure. And you can start to get this odd satisfaction out of just the tweaking and the refining, and just that process of trying to get better and better.
You reminded me of a quote that I read in high school, I think, and it was Tom Morello, who said that Tom Morello is a guitarist for Rage Against the Machine, if anyone doesn't know, and Audioslave. I never liked Audioslave, but anyway. Yeah. But you were never really a Rage fan either, huh, Nathan?
Yeah, I was.
Or you weren't as...
I wasn't.
Oh, you were? I thought
I wasn't.
You weren't as crazy about Zach de la Rocha's vocals, right?
Right, yeah. I still listen to them on my workout playlist and stuff, when
so you've come around?
Yeah. I never really got to casually listening to them, but there's not much better for working out and stuff, when you want to get into that kind of headspace, it's awesome.
Anyway, sorry. Tom Morello said something like, I practiced guitar for 10 years and then I played guitar. And so he's basically saying he had these years and years of preparation, and now he just plays and enjoys it.
Yeah.
So that was a pretty cool quote. It made me think of what you were talking about. But
yeah, there was another interesting quote from the documentary that kind of ties into this. He was talking about how one of the clashes that he had with his girlfriend was that he felt like his girlfriend saw the purpose of life as happiness, whereas he felt like the purpose of life was performance and like excellence. And he said nobody changes the world by being happy. You know, and so his idea is that this pursuit of excellence and trying to accomplish things that nobody's been done, like those are the things that really can like change the world, and that's what drives his like insane pursuit. And now I most certainly don't believe that our purpose in life is just performance and it's just whoever can be the best, and like, you know, that's a whole other conversation. But that does provide some insight into like his insane dedication to his craft. And I think there is something to be said there where that like the pursuit of excellence can be a goal in and of itself, right? Like, so that idea is that his whole purpose is to just be the best that he can possibly be. And so that's all encompassing. It's all the process and everything. It's not just some end result. And so, I think that's the biggest piece of encouragement that I would give is every single day when you pick up the guitar, you pick up your instrument, try to focus on just taking enjoyment and satisfaction and finding how rewarding it can be just by pursuing excellence. Every step that you take that gets you closer to whatever your end goal might be, enjoy that, and don't just delay your gratification until you feel like you've reached a certain level, because you're not going to get there. You're always whatever level you reach is there's going to then be another level and something you're always chasing. And yeah, I mean, because I've seen so many, you know, students who just like hobbyists who just don't enjoy playing the guitar. Like they get so bogged down by like making mistakes, and it like just discourages them so much. And they're like, oh, I got to get better at this. And it's all such a negative. Whereas if we practice, it's easier said than done, but it's a mental discipline. If you flip that on its head and said, ooh, like this is an area that I can really like hone and get better at, and like this is an opportunity, you know, it's kind of that corporate talk that's really obnoxious, but it's true to the extent, like they always said, like this isn't something this isn't a weakness, it's an opportunity or something like that. Like it's super cheesy, but
it's not a bug, it's a feature.
Well, yeah, there you go. That's even taking it a step further. Yeah.
That's
your world.
Quality. That's my quality assurance talking.
Yeah. So, but there's some truth to that, where your mindset can control a lot, and so, really, yeah, I would encourage you to try to focus on taking just joy in just the pursuit itself of excellence, and that will help you level up your focus in how you treat your mistakes with gravity, and that will help you level up your focus in how deeply you know your music. But I want to put a disclaimer over all of this too, and say all of this in moderation, because I think if we take this mindset of like life or death, right? A mistake is life or death. Like we train ourselves to kind of think that, then that can start to weigh very heavily on us, to where you can find yourself in that headspace where you're just totally discouraged all the time, because of course we're going to make mistakes. And so I would just say use this as a tool when you find that your focus is lacking, your practice is becoming kind of lackluster, and you need to flip a switch to kind of really take up the intensity. This is where this mindset comes into play. And I've said this before, you want to have two mindsets when it comes to mistakes. For practice and then for performance. So in practice, you treat mistakes with gravity, right? You avoid them at all costs. You treat them with seriousness. But in performance, you treat them with grace, and you let them go. You don't beat yourself up about it. And both of those are mental disciplines that you have to actually practice. And you can actually kind of see that how heavily this weighs on Alex Honnold when he doesn't have this balance and he doesn't take this kind of thing in moderation. He talks about how even from a young age, his mom instilled this mindset in him to always push himself to the point that anything he did, he felt like it was never going to be good enough. And so you can kind of see how that helped define him too. And of course, it helped him push himself to these crazy heights, but you can also see how it affects him and how the quote is, it created this bottomless pit of self-loathing. And there was a moment too where he was filling out this questionnaire and it talked about like, are you depressed? And he's just kind of paused there and it didn't really say like, and so
because all the other ones he was just like yep, and then he gets to that one and he's like
yeah, it was a very poignant. It was a small moment that you would miss, but I felt like it was very poignant. And so I think it's definitely important to read yourself and read your mindset. This is something that I like I said, use this mindset as a tool that I will gauge based on how I'm feeling. Like if I'm in a fragile mental state, maybe I won't stress out about mistakes or anything like that. And I'll just play just for enjoyment. But if I'm feeling good, but I'm kind of lacking focus and need to take up the intensity, getting into this mindset is really helpful in those cases. So yeah, just finding that balance is really, really important.
I love, to go back to what you're saying, I love practicing a hard section to a song or whatever. When, I think about drumming more, but I remember having these like epic milestones where like I finally got a certain technique with my foot, especially because foot technique is really hard with drumming, and getting it down and like having this euphoric feeling, and it's like, oh man, I can finally play this.
Right.
The payoff is always great when you have a lot of work put into something. Yeah,
enjoying those, and there's lots of those little victories along the way. You just got to be kind of looking for them,
right,
and celebrating them as they come. One, maybe just kind of to start wrapping up here, one quote that I really related to was after he bailed from his first attempt. So like he was trying to free solo El Capitan and it just wasn't feeling right. And so he backed down, and he was talking about it after the fact, and he was just kind of rambling on. And then he was like, I don't know, maybe I just suck.
Yeah.
I was like, I related to that so much. Because you have those, I'd certainly have those moments, and it's encouraging for me to see somebody like that who is really like at the absolute top of their field still has moments where they're just like, doubt themselves, and they're like, maybe I just suck.
Yeah, it's crazy. And like I said, it's the same thing in that Michael Jordan documentary. Like, these are the top athletes in their field or whatever, and they still feel like they're not good enough,
right,
at times, or a lot of the time.
It's
I mean, in some ways it's like inspiring, and in other ways it's like demoralizing. It's like, well, if they're not good enough, then what the heck am I doing in my life?
I think that's why it's also important to like have all this in balance, and to enjoy the process, because like I said, whatever level you think you want to reach, there's always another level. Like, right, I mean, yep. I am far away from, I'm confident in my ability as a guitarist, to the point that I also know that I am far from like the top of the top, right? Like I can see people who could play circles around me, and I still have people lots of times leaving comments saying how they would love to play like me. But I can sit here and say, I would love to play like this person. So I know if you got to my level, you're going to want to get to this next level. And so there has to be this level of kind of contentment that you have to practice, like enjoying where you're at. Yes, pushing yourself, but enjoying where you're at. Otherwise, you'll drive yourself nuts. Yeah.
Well, and there's that part in the documentary where he talks about achieving a free solo climb that he's been working on, and how he gets like, I don't know if it was happiness. I can't remember the word that he used. I think it was happiness or something like that. He's like, it's like you're just completely happy, at least just for a moment. or something like that.
Right.
And then basically insinuating that like, okay, after he completes something, like he's happy for a little bit and then that it goes away. He has to do something else. He has to find another.
Yeah.
Which I really hope he doesn't die climbing, man. But I just have a hard time like not.
Well, I just heard that.
Like, so
I heard
scary.
that they just got engaged. Actually, him and his girlfriend at the time. So I imagine. I don't know. I'd be surprised if he keeps going full speed ahead. But yeah, that would be that'd be tragic. It's always tragic for anybody, you know. But yeah, I hope and that's such the weird thing about all this. You know, maybe we'll kind of. It's like. You do kind of start to think about like what's the point of like in his life he said is, you know, in his mind the purpose of life is that performance. And so but you can't help but think how I don't know how much of a waste it would be for him to just do one of these climbs and just fall off and die and it be done.
Well, and it's funny too because you know there's a conversation he has with his girlfriend where she's like, I don't remember the guy's name that she's talking about, but she's like, what about so and so? Like he has a wife and he has a kid, and he was just kind of like, well, I mean, what'd she expect?
Right.
You know, and then she responds with like, I don't want to expect that. Like, I don't want you to die.
Yeah.
And he's just kind of sitting there like, and then she's like, so does that change your mind at all about like whether you want to keep doing these free solo climbs? And he's like, no, not really.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a very awkward. You felt like a third wheel sitting there watching the documentary right there in this like awkward like, private conversation.
He was like, you're not enough for me to stop climbing.
Right.
But yeah, who knows where their relationship is at now that they're engaged. I hope the best for them, but I hope the best for him. What he achieved is just and oh my gosh, you can't even put words to it. It's amazing.
And I think because I was thinking about that on the car ride over here, I was like, you know, well, what, like, to be so obsessed with this act of climbing that if you die, it doesn't matter. Yeah, it kind of started making me think about like, what's the point of that? And again, you know, no matter what your view on the purpose of life, you know, I think there's definitely something to be said about just pursuing excellence in everything that we do. And I think we need people in the world to really push the boundaries, because then it really does. It raises anytime something like that. And he talked about that too. Like, he's like, I just did this. Some kid's going to probably read about this, that El Cap just got climbed for the first time free solo. He's going to find the next thing to do that's even crazier. And it's like, that's kind of the world progresses as new bars are set to things that were previously thought as like absolutely impossible. And so we kind of need crazy people like that in the world to like push everybody else. And like, especially at that extreme level, I mean, cause it means the world to me. Again, like I'm such a small fry compared to what we're talking about, this record breaking performance. But I'll get people who message me or email me and say like I inspired them to pick up the guitar for the first time or to pick it back up after years. And that's one of the single most motivating things for me in doing what I do, to know that like, despite all the challenges and whether I feel like doing this, or whatever selfish reasons I might have for doing this, knowing that it can inspire somebody else in some way is such a motivating thing for me. And regardless of whatever else this is accomplished by him doing what he's done, which is obviously, again, such a crazier, much bigger accomplishment, he's inspired countless people. We're having this conversation, you know, and other people have had countless other conversations because of this, and he's set a new bar. And so, yeah, there's definitely something to be said about that.
Yeah. Well, and it's cool too, because, you know, with all the weird, like kind of social norms that he doesn't have, that even his climber friends talk about, like, yeah, dude, I don't understand the way he thinks.
Right.
He's still done pretty cool things. Like he has humanitarian organizations that like they show in the documentary where they're like giving people electricity, like solar electricity. He has like a very green effort in that, where because he doesn't want to add pollution to the world, so he like he provides people with power that's, you know, solar based, and so he does other stuff like that that's pretty cool as well. And yeah, so just that along with the like inspiration that he's giving, future climbers or people like us who are like, wow, the dedication that this takes is crazy. And even like the death portion of it, he talks about how like, you can die in a car accident any day.
Right.
And maybe I'm closer to death climbing these, mountains or whatever, rocks, but I would rather die trying to pursue something, amazing or whatever, instead of, just dying in the car accident.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, again, I highly recommend it. So hopefully this was, encouraging for you and motivating to you in the way that it was for me. I hope you're able to look at how you can adopt this stuff into your own practice. Again, treat mistakes with gravity, know your music deeply, and then take joy in the pursuit of excellence. We'll wrap up here. If you want to learn how to make your own classical or fingerstyle guitar arrangements like I do, you can go to my website, beyondtheguitar.com, and take my free training, Fretboard Freedom, where I teach you how to find and play chords anywhere on the fretboard. It's a great place to get started with arranging, and it's absolutely free. And you can find my music anywhere under Beyond the Guitar, especially on YouTube at Beyond the Guitar. Jeremiah, where can people find you?
You can find me. My artist name is Chomachi. That's CHOMACHI. And actually finally finished a little collaboration I've been talking about with my brother. And I submitted it to Spotify for like their playlist thing. So I have a release date, which is August 22nd. It's done. Like the music is all done. I don't have to do anything else. I just wanted to see if Spotify would pick it up or not. So I'll keep you guys posted on whether that happens. But yeah, the release date is August 22nd. So we're excited to finally be done with it because it's one of those projects that's just been sitting in the, hard drive, as it were, for the better part of a year. And so finally done with it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, as always, thank you so much for listening. Much love, and we'll see you in the next one.